الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. And welcome to the Living with Barakah show, a live show about living with Barakah. And today we'll talk about mindfulness, how mindfulness leads to Barakah. Let's get started, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum everybody, hope you're all well. My name is Muhammad Faris. I'm the founder of the Productive Muslim Company and author of the book The Productive Muslim, where faith meets productivity. I'm excited to be here today for another Living with Barakah show on how mindfulness leads to Barakah. And today we have a special guest who will talk to us about mindfulness, how mindfulness leads to Barakah. Today we have none other than Wadud Hassan. Wadud is the founder of Mindfulness Matters, a leadership institute, which is a mindfulness and emotional intelligence based leadership and character development program to empower people and organizations with tools for personal, professional, and organizational transformation. Wadud and his wife Layla also co-founded Define 360, a faith-based and experiential mindfulness and emotional intelligence program for Muslims to bridge the gap between faith and character, outward knowledge, and the inward experience of that knowledge. Wadud lives in Dallas in the Big D with his wife Layla and twin girls Alicia and Jannah. Wadud completed his graduate studies in leadership and organization development and performance at Vanderbilt University and leadership training at Harvard, IDEO, and Neuroscience Academy. He's also a certified mindfulness teacher through the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, which was born and developed at Google. And more important for me, Wadud is an expert in the art and the science of the Islamic side of mindfulness as well. And this is what he'll be talking to us today, inshallah ta'ala. Wadud, salam alaikum. So honored to have you here. How are you doing this morning?
Walaikum salam. Alhamdulillah. Good. Jazakallah khair for having me. Excited.
Barakallah feek. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for joining us. And for all of us watching around the world from Facebook and YouTube, this is a live session. So please do leave us a comment. Please leave your questions. I'll be looking at those questions and answering them live. This is your chance to interact and learn from an expert in Islamic mindfulness. So we'd love to hear from you. So just leave it in the chat in YouTube or in Facebook. And we'd love to hear from you, inshallah ta'ala. Well, dude, I guess we'll start off with just a basic definition. We hear the word mindfulness a lot. It's the buzzword. People throw mindfulness. We hear corporate Americans, talk about mindfulness behind the boardrooms. It's becoming the sort of the craze of the hour. What, in simple words, is mindfulness?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So, Bismillah, salatu salam, Rasulullah. So in terms of simple words, I'm certified through the Search Inside Yourself program, like you mentioned, which started at Google. Started training Google engineers on how to be more mindful, more productive, more focused, increase empathy, team building. And one of the definition used in that program is something very simple, going from autopilot to aware. So mindfulness is going from autopilot to aware. That's one of the definition of that program. I will definitely make that correlation to how I found all of that really deeply connected to my faith in a minute. Some other definitions, for example, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who's a faculty member at the University of Massachusetts General Hospital, and he's also one of the founders of mindfulness-based stress reduction program. That's at like hundreds of hospitals around the world. He defines it as focusing on the present moment with purpose and without any judgment. So focusing on the present moment with purpose and not judgment. But in layman terms, I think we a lot of times to talk about mindfulness as not getting carried away. Not getting carried away. And so these are just some of the simple definitions of mindfulness. And as we go more into the webinar today, we will talk more about what are the benefits and how do they connect to our faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess again, for someone who's, let's say, somewhat skeptical, but like, yeah, some kind of new age, spirituality going on here. What is this mindfulness stuff? We never had to use mindfulness before. What's all the craze about it? If you could explain sort of the research behind it, the neuroscience behind it, and say the benefit of learning this skill, which can be transformative, not only for your emotional well-being, but for your spiritual well-being as well.
Right. Yeah, they're just, this is like one of the burgeoning fields. Like if you just type the word mindfulness in PubMed, which is like a search website, you'll see thousands and thousands of studies emerging from around the world. So this is definitely one of those, hot things, hot topics right now, especially for the last couple of decades. And some people, understandably, started thinking this might be one of those fads that's just coming and just here for a couple of decades and then probably not going to go away. To me, what really attracted me to mindfulness was that in my graduate studies in leadership theory, I studied about a few dozen theories. And then also started looking at like all these different theories that came about without any validated peer-reviewed research. What really, attracted me to mindfulness and emotional intelligence was that they were actually, to me, they were like ayat. They were like signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom in our body. Like, okay, if you lead this way, and this is like kind of like a brain and behavioral based leadership. This is how you develop mindfulness, and this is what happens to you as a person when you're mindful, or to your brain or to your heart. And so when they started kind of showing this fMRI scans or these peer-reviewed connections, I started kind of being really fascinated by them, because then I started thinking like, okay, there are all these theories, but then these theories are based in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, like فَتَبَارَكَ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of creators, and He created the signs in our وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, that do not you see what is in your own body. So that really drew me to this field, and there are so many studies. So I'll start with some of the key benefits of mindfulness, right? So there are hundreds of benefits, but Texas Tech Institute of Neuroimaging, Dr. Tay and his colleagues did a meta-analysis of hundreds of studies, hundreds of peer-reviewed research, and they found that there are three top benefits of practicing and training on mindfulness. And the first thing they mention is attentional control, which is like focus, And I know, Muhammad, that in your work, I've taken the trainings with you, mashallah, and you're like a mentor to me as well. So I think that entire equation that you have, right, that focus times energy times time, right?
That's it. You got
it. is productivity. So you need to have time, energy, and focus. So you need to have all of that to be productive. And without focus, we're not going to be able to do anything in terms of being productive as spiritually or mentally, emotionally, physically. So this focus is really important, and attentional control, that we live in a time where attention is like the main commodity, right? Whoever can have your attention will have your wallet, will have your money, will have you, captured for hours. So we can get you on the screens. And there's all these, thousands of engineers are spending, their research just on that, how to attract the human behavior, the human brain, and get you captured on the screen for hours and hours. So that focus in a type of world that we live in has become something really important to come back to, really important to train on. So Daniel Gilbert and Matthew Killingsworth, these two psychologists at Harvard, for example, did a study, and they hooked up, this, like, they put gadgets on. There's about 2,250 people. They monitor their activity. And after a series of assessments, they found that, these people that they were studying, about 47% of the time, about 50% of the time, they were not present in the moment. They're not present in their current task. Their minds were wandering. And these are not just like intentional wandering of the minds, right? Like in our quarantine, we're in our home and we're just intentionally, like I remember the Bintan Island retreat with you guys, and intentionally mind wandering, like sitting by that infinity pool, looking out at the ocean, having some coconut water. It's not that type of mind wandering. It's like when you need to focus and your mind's just all over the place. You don't have a clarity of mind. You don't have focus of mind. And this is happening to us with so much information, so many things happening at the same time. So something really interesting they found, that not just that we're living 50% of our life, not being present in the moment, it's also that a wandering mind is not a happy mind. This is a really important, finding from that research, that people are, they had a higher happiness and satisfaction score when they were able to focus and get into a state of flow, right? And we talk about the state of flow. And flow to me is also kind of like that Barakah, right? When you're mindful and you just have this flow, that sense of flow, continuity, that impact, that, and we'll talk about Barakah too. But that's one of the studies that I really love, and I feel that it tells us how important it is to learn to focus, and also learn to bring that happiness and well-being by learning to control our mind.
Awesome, mashallah, I love that, mashallah. And I love how you would talk about this is a skill. It's a skill that you're learning, skill you're developing. And it's not, sometimes we feel like you have to be in a certain state of mind, but as we'll talk more about this, you'll see this is mindfulness can be accessed, very easy accessible, through simple techniques. And we'll actually have a technique we'll share live. But you've not only researched the science and neuroscience side of things, you've also went ahead and kind of delved deeper into our own tradition and asked the question, where is mindfulness perhaps, or how can we, does our faith talk about mindfulness? And you've come up with some really incredible insights. So if you can just talk about maybe the differences of what is quote unquote now it's Islamic mindfulness, if we're going to call it that way, and the sort of mainstream neuroscientific approach to mindfulness.
Right. Yeah, Jazakallah. So yeah, I think that, initially as I was going through the program, people were asking me like, what are you doing? Like, how do you do mindfulness? Like, it seems fancy. What do you guys do? And if as soon as I say the word meditation, for example, then a lot of Muslims will say, are you sure you're doing the right thing? Is it bid'ah, or is it something like haram, or is it like coming from, another faith tradition, not our own? And that definitely, because I was finding so much benefit in the practice and the training, even though it was a very kind of neuroscience based, kind of like a mainstream type of training, I still had to kind of reconcile that with my own faith and my own research, and I look back into where is this mindfulness and meditation in our deen, in Islam. And thankfully, there are so much work that our scholars have done in terms of, understanding the prophetic mindfulness, the prophetic, presence with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the concept of, khushu, or the concept of taqwa, or the concept of ihsan. So many of these words that are really important to Islamic mindfulness. So the major difference here is that, worldly mindfulness, it's more focused on the neuroscience, it's more focused on the science-based approach. And science, as you know, is evolving, and it can be challenged, it's not all conclusive, and it can always be, you have to take it with a grain of salt, right? Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, we have a spiritual tradition in Islam to have build our focus, whether it's in salah or whether it's having this deep state of muraqabah or state of watchfulness over the greatness of Allah and reflection. Like Abu Darda, the Prophet Sahaba, said that just reflecting for a moment is better than the entire night in worship. And it's because you just go deeper in that understanding and you deeper into kind of feeling and experiencing. Because Islam is more about the experience, and it's less about just the content, right? Less about just, and this is, I think, one thing you mentioned when you were introducing me, that's one of the things that really drew me to mindfulness, that we can experience some of these things. We can actually be experiencing a name of Allah in our heart and in our body, and we can feel it. So worldly mindfulness is concerned more about the emotional well-being. Islamic mindfulness is concerned about the spiritual well-being. It is that factor that how you talk about, you bring spirituality to productivity, right? You bring that soul and the heart connection, and that are sometimes missing. That we're a whole human being, and we are a body within a soul, not a soul within a body. And this is something really important to this Islamic mindfulness concept as well, that God is at the very center of it. The mindfulness of God fuels everything we do. It gives energy to everything we do. It's concerned with our spiritual well-being compared to just emotional well-being. And it's designed, for example, worldly mindfulness, they're having this mind-body connection, they're training the mind, and there's a lot of work around the brain. Whereas Islamic mindfulness, the Prophet says one of the concepts of mindfulness, like taqwa, there are many, many, many words. Taqwa, for example, that consciousness and mindfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet says that taqwa, and he pointed to his chest, that taqwa is here, right? Hahuna, the taqwa is here. And he kept pointing to his chest. So the heart is kind of like the center of that practice. In our tradition, the heart and the soul connection, through the physical heart to the spiritual heart, and that training the heart, and there's some fascinating studies that are just emerging, right? The connection between the heart and the brain. Who leads? Does the brain lead or the heart lead, right? And even as early as 1970s, people are, talking about the signal between the heart and the brain, and what the heart is thinking. Somehow the brain is able to, brain is responding. And so all of that is really fascinating, kind of seeing Allah's signs in our body. But basically, the Islamic mindfulness is cultivating the heart and the soul. It connects the mind and the body, and it makes that two-dimensional work into a three-dimensional work by bringing the soul into it. And I feel that mindfulness is a foundation for spiritual intelligence. And this is what I feel because of all the work that I have done in the last few years. And this is something actually specifically mentioned in our text, like Imam Ghazzali, rahimahullah, for example, mentions, or many other scholars mention, that the entire concept of, for example, muraqabah or mindfulness in Islam is to get to that state of ihsan, get to the state of ihsan. Like the Prophet ﷺ was asked in Hadith Jibreel, we know the Hadith, beautiful Hadith, that the highest level of faith where you have the spiritual excellence is that أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه, that you worship God as if you can see him, as if you can feel that presence. So that sense of presence, which is ihsan, is what mindfulness is, that we're actually cultivating the presence through the Islamic mindfulness.
I love that. SubhanAllah. Again, we kind of hear about these concepts, we talk about this concept, but sometimes kind of connect to them and then really sort of showcasing the power of these concepts in your own personal emotional lives. And for those of you who just joined us, I just shared this link inside the chat as well. We have an article that Wadud wrote for us on productmus.com, which is very powerful, goes into the sort of what is mindfulness and spiritual intelligence, and gives an Islamic framework. And he actually goes in more detail. There's a beautiful infographic that Wadud developed and our team helped design, and really captured the way they meet and way they diverge. And I highly recommend, if for you, those of you who have not read this article, I've already put the link inside the Facebook comment section and as well as in the YouTube section as well. So you can go into this article, read this article, and just educate yourself. Again, I guess sometimes sometimes we have this fear that we might be doing something wrong or bring it to something that's new, that's not in our faith. But when you read this article, when you look at this article, you'll see that the depth that Wadud has gone through to kind of make that connection and make that powerful connection. Wadud, any thoughts on this article and sort of how, this, and some of the key constant differences between the two, if you were to, I'm sure you can see this, I'm going to try and zoom in. The difference between the Islamic world and mindfulness, where they differ, where they agree.
Yeah, I think we just kind of went over that a little graphic last few minutes, and we just go a little bit deeper into the concept of presence, purpose, and how that the modern definitions of mindfulness, how they connect with Islamic mindfulness. So awesome. I think if I expand upon that a little bit more, and I talk about like you asked about the science or the neuroscience benefits of mindfulness. So we talked about the Harvard study on focus, right? And I'm wondering. And then there was two other main benefits that neuroscientists, they list for mindfulness. The second one is emotional regulation. And then another one that's mentioned in the top three is self-awareness. And these are really, as you can see, these are kind of like foundations of spiritual intelligence. Like if you want to have a state of ihsan with Allah or with yourself, with people, you need to really have these three qualities. You need to have focus, you need to have emotional regulation, you need to have self-awareness. And focus, as you can see, that it's related to mindful prayer, right? It's related to mindful prayer. It's related to the prophetic emotional regulation, how the Prophet had this amazing level of emotional regulation of people. Of course, this was deeply fueled, like we said, in the Islamic mindfulness model, with the mindfulness of God in the heart, that cultivation of the heart, that he was doing through his connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then emotional regulation, we know that whether it's taqwa, where you have emotional regulation, is staying within the boundaries and not stepping out, and that takes a lot of emotional regulation. And whether it is the emotional regulation of you're getting carried away by emotions and you forget what is your intention when you're conversing with someone, approaching something. And emotional regulation also is important, for building that prophetic compassion, the prophetic empathy. It's really important. And then the other benefits that's mentioned, self-awareness, for example, is kind of like the foundation, like Imam Ghazzali says, the self-knowledge. Whoever doesn't know himself, they do not know God. And he talks about, knowing your heart, what's in your heart, knowing your limbs, what's in your limbs. He talks about the 7 limbs. And through these, knowing yourself, you start to understand where God is, where you are in terms of in the sight of God, in the proximity of God. So it's really important spiritual connection there about spiritual self-awareness. That is this foundation for our spiritual intelligence.
Beautiful, mashallah, mashallah. And one of the interesting things that, I think we've talked about this also a while, this idea of Muslim, the idea of Barakah culture versus hustle culture, and how sort of the hustle culture world we live in, which is very egocentric, which is very worldly focused, material results focused. And we've been advocating, at the Barakah company, how to, basically seek Barakah culture. How can you live more God-centered, hereafter focused, purpose, intention-driven lifestyle? And mindfulness is absolutely a key skill that we need for it to shift, right? Because it's hard. We're trapped in hustle culture, the day-to-day, the daily hustle. And for us to constantly bring us over to the Barakah culture, mindfulness is that key. Mindfulness is almost like that skill that we need to kind of get ourselves trained in. So can you talk about how maybe what a few ways of mindfulness opens the doors for Barakah in our lives, how we can tap into Barakah in our lives, basically?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. And I just want to say that mindfulness is not like. I also want to talk about what mindfulness is not, right?
Good one.
Mindfulness
Yes.
is not. Mindfulness is not like you reaching this like state of like some type of nirvana. There's some type of like special connection, or that's you just like floating in the air type of a thing, or walking on the water type of a thing. That's not what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is spiritual cultivation, and it is your commitment to that practice.
Brilliant.
Mindfulness is continued practice. Like the Prophet said that the smallest act, the most beloved to God are even small actions that are consistent. That's what mindfulness is. That to cultivate the heart, you continue to do the practice. It doesn't mean that you become a super mindful human being like 24/7. Of course, we know that Prophet, Sahaba, or many scholars have reached to levels, with their years of devotion and sacrifice and commitment to knowledge and service. They've reached a stage where we study them and we look at them and we take them as our examples. But when I started going into this, field of mindfulness, who did I have that I could go and do that whole disciple thing, right? Oh, I'm going to learn mindfulness from you. Like I'm going to be at your service for a few years. Do we have time to do that? Or do we have even people that give us that type of time these days? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring the right people in the right way, inshallah, if we seek, sincerely. But that model may not work in today's kind of context that we're living in. So I just want to make sure that we clarify that it says bringing the very common human things that and common spiritual things that are in the mainstream Islam, like taqwa, like ihsan, like presence of heart, and just learning to practice it at a deeper level at your own.
Beautiful.
Just kind of and so that's where I started, and I started finding this huge benefit. And I feel that we can all start practice at that level, and then start looking for scholars and teachers that can help us take even a little bit more deeper as we go. So yeah, the concept of Barakah. Before I go into that, just a few concepts I think of Islamic concepts. Taqwa is mindfulness of God, and taqwa is definitely connected to Barakah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَل لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. That if you're mindful of Him, mindful of God, He will provide you from places that you could not even expect, you could not even imagine. So taqwa opens the door for Barakah. And so it's really important to understand these concepts. Ihsan, that Barakah, we know that Barakah is, as Imam al-Raghib al-Asfahani talks about, and Muhammad, you mentioned that in your, I think one of the talks you did in one of the conventions recently, that about Imam al-Raghib al-Asfahani's definition of Barakah, that it's like the attachment of divine goodness. It's the attachment of divine goodness to anything you do, right? Barakah. What is Barakah? It's the attachment of divine goodness to anything you do. And ihsan is, literally that you are attaching the presence of Allah to your heart. You're bringing the presence of Allah to your soul. This is ihsan, that worship God as if you can see Him. For if you do not see Him, know that He certainly sees you. At least come to this point where you feel His presence, that He sees you, if you're not able to get to the point where you witness Him. So if this is ihsan, then ihsan is literal attachment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to our lives. So what is better attachment? What is a better goodness that can be attached to our souls other than the presence of God, the remembrance of God, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with us. And then the concept of hudur al-qalb. Imam Ghazali mentions that as the number one quality for a mindful salah with khushu. And he says this presence of heart is the first thing you need to cultivate, right? And then he mentions this hadith, and I was just kind of blown away that I never come across this hadith before. And this was a hadith in Bukhari. It says that two rakah, just two rakah, without any distraction, will get all your past sins forgiven. Just two rakah without any distraction. So just two mindful rakah. That's amazing. Like the power of mindfulness, the barakah it has to wipe you clean. Then muraqabah, the concept of muraqabah, contemplation, meditation. And, whenever we use meditation, some people are a little bit allergic, like Muslims or something, like, oh, I don't know what their meditation is coming from. And we just like, people don't have monopoly on the word God, right? God is one God. Same way that people don't have monopoly on the English word meditation. A meditation. If you just see what meditation is, it's nothing but just kind of this practice and of cultivating your mind and focusing on something and building something. Depending on what you want to achieve. And as we know that from the Prophet himself, starting from Ghar Hira to all the companions to the scholars, they all had to meditate, whether it was on knowledge, whether it was on Allah's names and attributes, whether it was on their own selves and where they are in terms of their own development. This meditation contemplation was a very important part of their spiritual journey, right? So muraqabah is a state of watchfulness. And Imam Ghazali has an entire book. Imam Ghazali, Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, they all have chapters on meditation or contemplation or muraqabah in their books, right? And Imam Ghazali has an entire book, book 38, which is Kitab al-Muraqabah wal-Muhasabah. And, scholars, talked about this concept that we see now in neuroscience, that with this meditation, people are finding this sense of calmness. They see this connection between their rational brain and their emotional brain. So basically, if you're looking at your emotional brain, your irrational brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is right behind your forehead, this is responsible for executive thinking, rational thinking, higher order decision making, and this is what makes us human, right? And then the lower part of the brain, some of the scientists are talking about that brain, like for layman language, like the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain, right? So the upstairs brain, where we're doing the rational thinking, and the downstairs brain, which is the emotional center, the limbic system, the amygdala, which is kind of like the siren of the brain. And when we get into a fight, flight, a freeze response, like when we have anxiety or depression, or we're worried, we're distracted, that emotional center is flaring up. And how do you calm that part? And how do you build this connection between the rational part and the emotional part, so the rational part of the brain calms you down, neuroscientifically speaking, right? For us, we have a third dimension of the heart and the soul. But here, just purely neuroscientifically speaking, they found that with just a few minutes of practice, even with just 20 minutes practice, there was one Harvard study where they did just a daily few minutes of practice for 8 weeks. And there was a huge shift in how their rational part was activated. They were more calmer, and then they were able to then down-regulate the emotions, right? So this is something that our scholars talked about 1,000 years ago. Imam al-Tu'ajiri, he talked about that with muraqabah, you get to a sakina, like quoting him, he's saying, stillness, or al-sakina, is produced by the servant's muraqabah for his Lord. Glorious and exalted is he, to the point that it is as if he can see him, as if he can kind of feel him, experience him. So this was one of the things about muraqabah. The other words used in the Quran, tafakkur, contemplation, meditation, reflection. We talked about Imam Abu Darda, that a moment of reflection is better than the entire nights of worship. Other words, tadabbur, contemplation of the Quran. Tawassum, which is the reflection of the nature, like seeing the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala nature. And of course, dhikr of Allah, dhikr, remembrance, that Allah bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. And then a very important concept, I think very important to mindfulness, is this concept of intention, niyyah, right? That we don't sometimes associate with mindfulness, but this is so important because it is the foundation of everything we do. And it is a form, niyyah is actually making intention is a form of meditation. You have to meditate and reflect for a moment to make the right intention when you do things, right? So it's a form of meditation. So all of this is really relevant to our spiritual kind of understanding. And how that connects to Barakah, I think that was your question. It's a long-winded answer to that because I wanted to first talk about the terminologies. The Barakah definition, attachment of divine goodness, how is it connected to mindfulness? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah is with those. مَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah is not, like literally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is attached to those who practice ihsan. And what is ihsan? That level of, that presence. Worship Allah as if you can see him. So muhsin, and then muhsin doesn't have to be just that. It also is our spiritual excellence with ourselves, with people. But we see that mindfulness and the concept of ihsan, where you're mindful of Allah, you're having the presence of Allah, is attachment of Allah to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes your companion. And so how that's connected to that concept of attachment of divine goodness to Barakah. Also, the other thing that I think, Muhammad, you mentioned, one of your definition I heard was that productivity is about maximizing our output, and then I think you talked about Barakah is maximizing that output even more, like maximizing your impact. Maximizing your impact, and I think that same thing with mindfulness, that with mindfulness you maximize your impact. You're spending the same 5 minutes, but you can, with that 5 minutes, if you have this mindful dua, or this mindful turaka, or this mindful conversation with your colleague, or mindful conversation with your spouse, you can maximize the impact, and you do that while being on the phone, while being distracted, you don't even know what happened, right? So you maximize the impact by just being mindful in the moment. Also, another concept that I normally love to see, like in Baraka, is that more in less, right? And also, I think you mentioned that perhaps more and less. And we see that mindfulness is all about more and less, just the quality and not the quantity, right? That, like, we know that Abu Darda said, tafakkur, reflection, moment of reflection is better than the entire night's worship. So definitely this concept of Barakah is really deeply embedded in our deen, and we see that Barakah is very strongly connected to mindfulness. Mindfulness brings the presence of God, attachment of divine goodness, attachment of Allah's company itself with us, and then it maximizes their impact, and it gives us more and less.
Absolutely, love that. And I would love to just to highlight what something you said, which is how a mindful dua versus a heedless dua, right? A mindful salah versus a heedless salah. A mindful moment with your child, with your spouse, with your parents versus just a distracted one. Think of the barakah of that. Think about the impact of that. I mean, that, if you talk about barakah, that's barakah, when you just have those moments. And mindful setting intention before you start a project, mindful setting intentions before working on something, and then thinking about the intention, just the impact of that. It goes way, way beyond. Even if you were to keep it at a neuroscience level, just being conscious of it, you can see the impact and never mind the spiritual side of it as well. So I know we've been talking about mindfulness, meditation. Maybe the best way to give people get a feel of this, and I don't know if you're ready for this, we'll do this too, is to guide them through a practice. Just walk us through a practice, and I'm gonna help you here. I'm gonna sort of turn the screen off a little bit and just walk us through a guided Islamic mindfulness practice, which you just help us kind of understand. But if you have any instruction before we get started, and then we can go from there, inshallah.
Yeah, of course, inshallah. Yeah, let's do a practice. I think one of the for the practice, I will perhaps use like a Ghazzali model. One of Imam Ghazali's model, when he talks about, people ask like, okay, all this is great, like all these things you're saying about mindfulness, how do we do it? Like, how do we get to that place, right? And mashallah, we have a beautiful, a lot of things that we have at our disposal as Muslims, whether it's even a mindful salah or wudu, or we have many things we do that we can incorporate mindfulness in them. But one of the things we can easily incorporate mindfulness in is just, even when you're sitting, even if you don't have wudu, wherever you are, however you are, you can spend a few minutes to bring this sense of remembrance of Allah in your heart and build this sense of mindfulness in your heart. So Imam Ghazali says to train on presence, how to build that presence of heart, hudur al-qalb. He says that sit in seclusion, sit in a place where you are not interacting with anyone, just for a few minutes, gives them this mindful 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 15 minutes for yourself. Whatever is easily available to you. Start with even something that's really is easily accessible to you. And he says, then empty your heart of all concerns. Empty your heart of all concerns. Just kind of say to all your concerns and worries that, just stop for a moment. I'll get back to you right now. I am, stepping into a very important space where I'm going to try to feel this presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my heart. And then Imam Ghazali says, strive to let no thought enter your mind besides Allah the Exalted. Imam al-Muhasibi, another scholar, he says, quiet your inner voice. Even when we're doing mindfulness practice, we are like our own self-critic, and then we might have a lot of different thoughts, like, oh, I'm not really good at this. I'm not sure if this is really going to work. Why am I doing this? But if your intention is really strong, that no, I need to build this clarity of mind and heart. I need to build this presence of heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my heart. Then that's your intention, and that fuels you, and you kind of like an analogy, when the teacher tells the little kids as they're walking and they're making a lot of noise, and tell them, kids, bubbles in your mouth, either just for a second, they tell them, just bubbles in your mouth, right? And because there's so much noise, so much distraction, everybody's everywhere, and so the same way, you just kind of put bubbles on your inner self, bubbles in the mouth of your inner self, and say, just, my nafs, settle down for a minute. It's okay. I'll get back to you. We're fine. And then you transition to this training. So with that, inshallah, I will lead the practice. Bismillah. Salatu salam ala Rasulillah. So I would ask everyone to sit on a comfortable chair. If you're sitting on a chair, then just perhaps sit up a little bit. And the reason that we kind of work on posture for mindfulness practices is because, postures can bring a sense of alertness. We can sit in a way that, we're kind of, just lazy or just sitting back and we're not fully focused. But what happens when you really focus in a conversation, when we're really focusing on some work, you sit up, you have the sense of alertness. So the posture makes a difference. Sitting in a way that supporting your lower back on the chair that you're sitting, yet you lengthen your spine as if you're bringing the sense of alertness to your upper body. And then lower and soften your shoulders. Soften your shoulders to bring the sense of relaxation. So you're relaxed, yet you're alert. Lowering our gaze, and perhaps closing our eyes if that helps us bring our mind, gather and collect our mind. Closing our eyes. And looking inward in our heart. So instead of looking outward, we're shifting the focus to our inward. Quieting the inner voice and asking your inner voice to just be quiet for a few moments as we practice this. Let's start by also making sure your hands are on your thighs so you feel the texture of your dress, the cloth that you're wearing. Also your feet on the ground, feeling your feet on the ground. Perhaps you're sitting on carpet or hardwood. So you're kind of grounding yourself in this moment. Facing the Qibla if this is a spiritual practice, and bringing a sense of remembrance of Allah in your heart. Bismillah. Let's start by taking a deep breath in and a long breath out. Sometimes we forget to even breathe properly, and taking a full breath or a deep breath, it helps activate the parasympathetic system. It brings this sense of calmness, activates the rational part of the brain, and it calms the fight, flight, or freeze response in your brain. It brings a sense of calmness. So taking a couple more deep breaths in and a long breath out. Now letting the breath find its regular pattern. Just breathing in and breathing out normally. We're using the breath as a tool of attention. See if you can gather your mind on your breath. Just for a few moments. And it's okay if your mind wanders, you just keep bringing it back. Where is the breath most alive in your body right now? If it helps, you can even place your hands in different parts of the body where you can feel the breath. For example, is the breath most alive at your nostrils? Place your hand on your chest. Is it most alive on your chest? Or do you feel the breath more vividly on your abs? Or perhaps a sensation of your whole body breathing. Wherever the breath is most alive for you, we'll call this the home base of our attention. We're learning to train focus, train on attention. Bringing our focus, bringing our kind and gentle. Don't have to try too hard. Don't have to, have any judgment for ourselves. Just relax and have this sense of kindness as we are trying to bring this attention on wherever we are feeling our breath. Before we do some dhikr, we want to just see if we can gather our mind so that our mind is not scattered. Can you stay with just a few cycles of breath without your mind wandering? You may say to yourself that breathing in, I know I'm breathing in, and breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. letting go of all the tensions in your body. A lot of times we have things to do afterward, so our body is telling us to, already transition to the next thing, but just letting that go, and we will get to that when the time comes. Right now we're here in this moment. We are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we're going to change the anchor from the breath to gathering our attention on the name of Allah. And we're going to do that with Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. And as we say Astaghfirullah, we will gather our mind to remember Allah. And we will try to point to your heart as if we're trying to bring this presence and remembrance of Allah in our heart. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. Astaghfirullah. Feeling it in your heart. Try to see if you can experience it in your heart. Astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah. If your mind wanders, just kindly and gently bringing it back. Astaghfirullah. 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 The Prophet said that verily at times there is a fog over my heart, so I seek forgiveness of God 100 times a day. And this getting rid of this fog, for the Prophet it was just, this perhaps a little bit of preoccupation that scholars explain with things that he had to do throughout the day. For us, we get so distracted and we put this veil upon our hearts, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ready to be in our presence. So bringing this sense of presence of heart as we say Astaghfirullah. Can you visualize as you're returning to the remembrance of Allah, as you're returning to the remembrance of Allah in your heart? Can you visualize the peace, the mercy, and the forgiveness of Allah descending upon your heart? Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah. A lot of times when we say Astaghfirullah, we get preoccupied thinking about our sins or our shortcomings, which is important. But for this practice, we're trying to bring the presence of Allah in our heart and visualizing that Allah's doors of mercy and forgiveness is always open for us. Can you just now, instead of saying Astaghfirullah with your tongue, say it with your heart for the next few moments. Keep saying Astaghfirullah, but through your heart, feeling it in your heart without moving your tongue. Just stay in this space for a few moments. Ilahi anta maqsoodi wa ridaka matlubi. My ilah, my God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are my purpose. Anta maqsoodi wa ridaka matlubi. Your pleasure is my ultimate desire. Bringing our attention back to our breath for a minute as we close this practice. See if you can stay with your breath. Again, lowering your gaze, closing your eyes, looking inward in your heart. Can you stay with the breath for a few moments? And if your mind wanders, just kindly and gently bring it back. Notice, how do you feel right now? Do you feel any shift in your attention? Do you feel any shift in how you feel in your mind? How you feel in your body? How you feel in your heart? Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. That's it. You can open your eyes, just come back to each other. I hope that was beneficial. Actually followed through.
MashaAllah.
And if you're watching the recording, it's important, if you didn't, to go back and even practice it one more time. And one of the things that we ended with, Ilahi anta maqsoodi wa ridaka matlubi, comes from another scholar, Sheikh Amin Air, and he talks about breaking the monotone of, as he's saying, sometimes we say astaghfirullah, 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 and then we just, like, our mind is all over the place. So he has this, wordings to refocus, refocus. Ilahi أنت مقصودي ورضاك مطلوبي. Sometimes you refocus by just kind of reorienting your attention and coming back to that space.
Beautiful. I would like to hear people's thoughts, those who practice, those who are listening live on Facebook and YouTube, kind of see what their thoughts of this practice. Have they experienced it right now? If you followed along, what are your reactions? And as those reactions come in, again, just reflecting back on that practice, it took less than 5 minutes. But that's also with you adding instructions of kind of how to get into it. But you could do this probably very regularly. How often would you recommend someone to kind of get this practice? Once a day, after salah, like just to get into the habit and get into the practice of developing mindfulness? Can you hear me? Wadud, can you hear me, Wadud?
Yeah, I can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was asking how often does someone needs to get into the practice of...
okay. Sorry, you were asking me questions and I was looking at all the comments.
Alhamdulillah. Go ahead.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, mindfulness webinar. Alhamdulillah.
I was being mindful of what people are saying and how, if there was any experience there. Okay, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
All right. Jazakallah khair. Yeah. So yeah, in terms of how long you have to do it, those of you that are saying, like in comment, those of you that are saying that you really felt good, you feel amazing, you felt a sense of uplift. I just wanted to just kind of reflect on this moment for a minute, and just 10 minutes of practice gave us a shift in how we felt. Just 10 minutes of practice gave us a shift of our attention being all over the place to here right now. And just a few minutes of practice like this, before we stand for salah, for example, or before we transition from work to home and get back to spending some quality time with our family, or when we were going into a meeting and we have a really important presentation. So as you can see, that this can really help us connect, bring the barakah of Allah, and bring us this sense of calmness and clarity that can help us be more productive in whatever we do. Spiritually productive, first and foremost, for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also emotionally and physically productive. So in terms of, neuroscience research, they have seen these shifts, even people that have practices just 20 minutes for 3 sessions, or just a few minutes every day for 8 weeks. But there has been a really, deep work in one of the labs here, multiple labs, one of the labs especially, Dr. Richie Davidson, he has done some work on this, people that practice mindfulness, and he has actually scanned the brain of people that are doing it in the short term versus those that are doing it for maybe, they have reached a certain amount of hours. They're doing it for maybe 7,000 to 10,000 hours. They have done it for 7,000 to 10,000 hours versus people that are doing it for a lot longer, like, these experts. And how their brains have changed, or how their brains have changed in terms of response, reactivity to stress, in, quickly turning off their mind wandering to default mode network in the brain to just really focus in the moment. And basically when all of this becomes part of you, like you just naturally, all of this become you, is when you do long-term practice. When you do long-term practice, when you are practicing it for every day for a few minutes, you're trying to incorporate it not just in that practice, but also in everything else you do, in your conversation, in your listening, in your salah, and your wudu. So you're just accumulating all these hours, and you're accumulating all this practice. And the more you practice, and the more consistently you practice, and over the years, it starts becoming your default state. And that takes a longer time. But even without it becoming you or your traits, or altering your traits to become the new you, or your better self or your best self, this can still be of benefit. With just a small practice, just a few minutes of practice, you can find the shift, inshallah. So whatever is easy for you, like in our masterclass, we say even if you take 2 minutes a day or 5 minutes a day, we have homework every week for mindfulness practices. But yeah, just some practice every day to continue, and then slowly build up on it, inshallah.
Awesome, mashallah, mashallah. You mentioned the masterclass, and before we get to the masterclass, I want to share people that we have a special gift for those who are watching live with us, and stay tuned. We'll be sending you a special gift, so I'll let you know how to get that. But before that, I want to talk about the Productive Muslim Masterclass and the Productive Muslim Mindfulness Masterclass. There's so many of these masterclasses, I kept track of them. The Productive Muslim Mindfulness Masterclass, which is a partnership with Wadud, who teaches this masterclass, and we launched it first in August this year. Alhamdulillah, we're running it the second time again. And the reason we're running the second time is honestly the amazing stories we've heard of people who went through the first time. I want to play a video clip of people who went through the Mindfulness Masterclass and the impact it had on their lives before we go to talk about the actual program itself. So here's a clip for you guys to watch.
What was really inspiring for me is that the concept of mindfulness, I always thought of that as a Western concept. And in reality, it's really embedded within Islam. We have that within our own religion. That was really, something that I was, wow, subhanallah, alhamdulillah. I'm so grateful for that, opportunity to be able to connect and learn more about how to become mindful in my salah, mindful in my wudu.
One of the things that I really loved in this class was, especially, I think all of us were really shocked by the wudu practice that we did together. And that was really, really very good because we just learned a different layer of wudu, and just doing it maybe multiple times in a day, or just adding a few more minutes to what I'm actually doing, that inshallah will get to the point where I can say that, I have khushu in my prayers, and that I have a better connection with my Lord, and that I am just an overall, just a very well connected person.
Alhamdulillah, the course really helped me to get to my best self when faced with a challenge. I now turn to Allah at any time when I'm faced with challenges or any difficulty, or when faced with fear, or when overwhelmed with work or at home with my kids. Alhamdulillah, I am able now to focus more on praising Allah and thanking Him rather than get overwhelmed with anxiety and worry.
Having practiced mindfulness for the last 5 years, I feel very happy and thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for letting me know the perspective of Muslim mindfulness through this class. I feel much more immersed in mindfulness practice myself in my daily life, not just mentally, but also spiritually. And I really recommend this class to those of you who want to live mindfully and pray more mindfully and be a more mindful Muslim.
My before and after state is clarity, focus, groundedness, more in tune and more self-aware, and God consciousness, with being God conscious. So I appreciate that. Jazakallah khair. And definitely, guys, you definitely have to take this class.
I recommend everyone to take it. So if you're thinking about it, you don't have to. Just take it. It's going to be beneficial, inshallah.
I very highly recommend this class. You will learn a whole lot more than what you think you would. So very highly recommend Brother Wadud and the Productive Muslim folks. So Jazakum Allah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, so registration is open, and those are some amazing testimonials from your first set of students. We ran this as an experiment in the summer, weren't sure what would be the reaction, but alhamdulillah, by Allah's permission, tawfiq, the reaction has been really overwhelming. And Wadud, I want you to help us talk about this program, sort of how you structured, how you designed it, and who is it for?
Jazakallah khair. Yeah, so it is for everyone that's watching.
That's a good start.
It's for everyone, and it's basically making mindfulness accessible to all the Muslims everywhere. People said, "Oh yeah, I want to practice like this." This concept of muraqabah, like this far-fetched concept of like where Sufis used to sit together in this halaqah. We didn't know where they were; they were all hidden. Or get a map to find them. So it's not about any of those type of things. Bringing it very mainstream Islam, and making it for every Muslim to learn how to practice, this mental, emotional well-being, and then bring this, deep level of spirituality that our Deen has taught us through the Quranic ayahs. We incorporate many Quranic verses, hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, and especially the teachings of many of our scholars, including, of course, Imam Ghazali's work is at the center of it. Imam Ghazali's work, Ibn Atallah's work, some of the scholars' work, but it's accessible for everyone, And when we wrote the story about spiritual intelligence, we actually, it was based on true story. It was, a Muslim mom that is, really doing well in her career, but also trying to juggle between her career at home, kids, life, and feeling distracted, and how do we bring the sense of calmness and heal our heart and our spiritual selves through this mindfulness of God. So that's where the heart model comes in. The H stands for healing with mindfulness. And we actually took it from Surah Luqman, and we made this is a Quranic framework, the heart framework, and we took it from Luqman alayhi salam's advice to his son. And we said, if Luqman had this hikmah, this sense of spiritual insight, then what was he saying to his son? And what is this spiritual insight? What is this level of spiritual intelligence, excellence that we can bring through his? And that's where we based basically this entire heart model on. The H stands for healing in his presence, and we're learning about the heart model, the Islamic concept, some of the scientific benefits, some of the Islamic benefits, and then we're learning to practice, different models that our Deen teaches us, and incorporating it even with daily things that we already do, and how do we bring these layers of mindfulness to it. So learning both from a neuroscience research perspective, but also from a classical Islamic understanding perspective, and bringing it together and making you experience them, not just learn through concept, but experience some of them. And then next we talk about, the story that we talked about, the Maryam story. And now I have a new story that I'm building, Ahmed's story. It's actually also based on a brother that gave me this testimony recently about all the issues he was having and how it shifted him, this practice. So, lost and confused about our purpose. Like, we're working all day, we're getting tired, we're not at our best self when we get home, and just feeling this kind of lost. We don't have this sense of purpose in what I'm doing in life. And how do we reorient and refocus on purpose? How do we develop our deep sense of purpose? And that also is based on mindfulness practices. We actually do a purpose meditation, but all based on Quran, hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and also, kind of like integrating some of the brain and behavioral science to see the beautiful signs of Allah in our body. The third, we go into, how do we overcome negativity? A lot of us, we get stuck in this negative thoughts, negative stressors. And, they say that we don't live in our life, we live in our minds. And the way that we talk to ourselves really shape who we become. And we somehow craft this negative story about ourselves in our life. And people are not able to get out of it. And I'm sometimes surprised to see that, people are, just have a very kind of flawed way of thinking. And how do you kind of overcome those and say to those thoughts that you are not me and I'm not you, and I will let you pass through, And this is where you start overcoming negativity with positive thoughts, with positive thinking. And then you learn how to reflect and let go of those thoughts. And you learn how to focus and reframe those negative into positive. Reframe, from complaining or feeling down or feeling negative to positive to gratitude. And as we know, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, Allah increases you. You can achieve, Allah will bring you up. Allah will give you more. You can achieve more with gratitude. And then we go more into, this self-regulation. That, okay, I have these, these are things that I'm building myself up with, but what about with people? What about with people? People are, a source of stress for me, or, they're turning me off, or I'm not at my best self when I'm dealing with them. So how do we then build, we've heard this word patience, but what does patience really mean? Like, all these really amazing, concepts, but I don't know how to practice any of this. Or I want to practice humility, but how? I want to regulate my difficult emotions, or regulate getting carried away and, not my best self, my colleagues or my family or people, and how do I get to a better place? And this is where we talk about the science behind emotions. How do you understand emotions in your body? How do you understand your triggers? How do you be aware? And not just from a neuroscientific perspective, which we do, but then we build Imam Ghazali's spiritual self-awareness, spiritually aware, like that heart-centric, soul-centric model of building mindful self-awareness, so that once you're aware, then you can start to have that space between the stimuli that gets you off from your best self, to your lower self, and then how do you get back up again with that awareness and the practice of regulation. And last but not least, we talk about compassion of the Prophet ﷺ, that how the Prophet ﷺ, were sent for compassion. Except only for compassion. And how do we build compassion when we don't even feel like being kind anymore? We feel stressed, we feel stretched, we feel like I don't have anything else to give anymore. How do you build that capacity? How do you refuel yourself? And mindfulness practices around that, we actually developed a compassion meditation based on the heart model of the Prophet ﷺ, and based on the stories of how Prophet ﷺ dealt with people, and how could he, after all the difficulties he went through, refuel. And kind of going back to that and refueling, not just through learning about the neuroscience evidence of benefits of compassion, but also connecting it with Islam and spirituality. And that's how we do it. And it is for every working professional that wants to lead more mindfully, that want to be more emotional intelligent at work with their teams. It's for every not just professionals that are juggling between their work and home, but also moms, teachers, people that are also in a position to influence others, leaders, teachers, mentors, parents, that we want to get to our better self, and then also lead others as we experience these things. And as we get more bought into these things, we know the value of these things, then we can start sharing with others as well, and influence our community, inshallah, to become more mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and kind of transform ourselves to our better self, our best self. And it's a journey and not a destination. It's a journey that we continue to be on, inshallah.
Absolutely. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. I think that the interesting thing here that this model, the heart model, it's pretty comprehensive. I mean, we spend, for those of you who've been in the first masterclass know this, then we spend 2-3 hours every evening. And Wadud, mashallah, is extremely generous with his time. Not only goes above and beyond in teaching, but also during the week as well. There's weekly support, so you can share your reflections. One of the things that I noticed about this masterclass, which is quite unique to the mindfulness masterclass, is how the students came forward and shared their thoughts and shared their journeys and shared the reflections, and how that helped everybody else. So it's not just about one-way learning. It's more like it's a many-to-many learning, because you see the community of people coming together, each one making and taking the intention to work towards a better selves through this mindfulness practice. So again, this mindfulness program starts next Tuesday, which is a week from tomorrow, at 6 o'clock US Central Time. Go to productiveness.com/mindfulness. If you can attend the live sessions, if for some reason it's a different time zone and it's pretty late for you, then you're more than welcome to, we will send you a recording within 24 to 48 hours after each class. It is a program that is a skill. It's a skill that you're developing. It's a skill that you're learning. It's a skill that you're investing in yourself and you're developing yourself, that will help you for a lifetime. One amazing feature about Productive Muslim Masterclasses, all our masterclasses, we have this feature, is that when you sign up once, every time we run it again, you join as a free guest. So you can invest in this once and you can keep on rejoining again and again and again. So I'm really excited for you to help join, inshallah. Now, about that gift that I promised, inshallah. So I want to share a gift I would like to give people who attend this webinar as a thank you. If you go to productiveness.com/mindfulness gift, right? Just one word, mindfulness gift. You will get 3 things from us. You get an email with your infographic, which is the Islamic mindfulness and the worldly mindfulness, the difference between them. That's a great infographic and PDF. You can download it, print it, share with your friends, tell them about it. You get articles that Wadud have written on our website on Islamic mindfulness, and also get the portion of today's webinar where Wadud went through that guided mindful Islamic meditation practice. So we'll just take that part off as an audio so you can listen to it, maybe practice at home, practice 3 times, inshallah. So you go to this link to productiveness.com/mindfulness gift. I'm going to post this link inside of Facebook as well as inside of Facebook and inside of the YouTube comments, so you guys can check it out, inshallah. So please do go through this website, get your gift today. It is for free. We're not going to charge for this gift. It is for free. Just drop your email address, inshallah, and we'll send you give us about a day so we can get to all the recordings to you, inshallah. But really excited for you to start your journey, start your mindfulness journey. We want to make sure that this becomes common practice. We want, Muslims around the world should own this and should lead this. We should teach the world about mindfulness versus being taught. We should be the ones who are offering to the world the whole dimension of spirituality. Right now, spirituality is kind of removed from mindfulness. It's very very neuroscience basis. We're saying we accept the neuroscience, but we're going to adding the spiritual intelligence to it, and that's what we're offering to the world, the Barakah factor. So I hope you guys join us in our mission to spread this concept and join Brother Wadud in his work that he's been doing for the past several years on trying to connect the two and really making this connection between mindfulness and Islamic and Islam as well. Wadud, any thoughts, I guess, any parting gifts, advice people to to leave off, and of course, if there's any major question, we'll help you answer them. But any thoughts, anything you'd like to share about just this journey and where people should go with this journey, whether they join the masterclass or not? Shaitan.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are some questions about brothers in that video, because we had a bunch of sisters, mashallah, our amazing sisters that were on the testimonial video. Yeah, we have brother's testimonials in writing, and mashallah, we're waiting for one of our brothers to send their video, so he didn't make it into the video. But of course, we would love to see more of our brothers. There has been some. I just want to mention that point a little bit more. I see sometimes that, alhamdulillah, I'm so happy to see a lot of brothers commenting here. I want our brothers to take this as seriously as our sisters, because I had seen the trend where sometimes our sisters are more willing to kind of work on and talk about some of these emotional things, and brothers feel a little shy, or maybe they feel a little embarrassed, or they're not really fully ready. I just want to say that this work is needed for each and every one of us. This work is needed for every Muslim, inshallah. And this is not the end all be all, but this will be, inshallah, probably one of the best investments you'll make in terms of, having this tools that you're going to pick up from this masterclass in your journey. And of course, you attach that with your continuous, increase in your spirituality, also how you learn from other scholars, teachers. But this is something that you're going to pick up that will really help you in that journey. So stay close to, I would say, do go through this, do go through the articles that we have on our website. Try to see what the heart model is about. Try to listen to the audio if you have the guided mindfulness practice, inshallah. Send us more feedback on what are some challenges you're having, and what are some content that you would like to see us kind of offer to the world, to you. And then, inshallah, we would also like to see if you can. It is deep work, though. The masterclass is deep work, meaning that you are committing, 2 to 3 hours every week, plus a few minutes, like 10 minutes or 20 minutes every day, to do the homework on practicing mindfulness. So this type of work needs that type of focus. Just kind of the surface level work helps you. It gives you some shift. It gives you some tools. But the deep work that it needs your it's a jihad. It's a struggle. Jahadu wallazina jahadu fina lanahdiyannahum. So Allah will open doors when you struggle, and you have to do with amwalikum wa anfusikum. You have to do with your wealth and with yourself. You have to invest in your money and your time to really go in it and do the deep work, because the research also that I was mentioning to you shows that people that do it with teachers and guides and an environment, and with the community, they benefit more, and they become more long-term practitioners than those that are just kind of coming and going, picking up a few tools here and there, which is beneficial. But to make it stick, you need more practice and a longer exposure, which is what this masterclass is about, inshallah. Welcome everyone, and jazakallah khair for listening.
Alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair. Absolutely, it is a long-term practice, not a short-term sort of experience. And I also want to say that yes, it is an investment in time and wealth, but think about the return. Think about being able to be mindful at work and be able to focus. And what is the return on that? Think about being mindful in relationships. Think about being mindful in your salah. Think about being mindful all the situations where right now you're super distracted. People are complaining that you're not you're always distracted, always busy. Think about what that means for things that you care the most about, and see if that's worth it for you or not. And again, I'm not trying to pressure you or put emotional triggers on you, but just the reflection of the impact of this work and how it can have on your life, inshallah. And again, alhamdulillah, we've brought the experts here, and mashallah, Wadud, literally, he is for me, I see him as the number one expert in Islamic mindfulness practice, and being able to really think deeply, not only about the neuroscience and research, the papers, but also the Islamic framework, and kind of not just connecting things and putting labels on things and make them sound Islamic, but deeply thinking about where the connection is, where they agree, where they disagree, where they differ, where they add to, where they remove. That's part of this work. It is a completely new approach to this work, and I'm hoping that all of you can tap into this world and just see the benefit, inshallah. Again, the reminder, the masterclass will take place next Tuesday. Will start next Tuesday, 15th December, inshallah. The 29th Rabi' al-Thani, 1442, inshallah. It's our second cohort. Really excited to have a second cohort. And also, inshallah, we will have, for those of you who want, you can get your free gifts. Go to productiveness.com/mindfulness gift and get your gift, inshallah, for this session. With that, I want to say thank you so much. I hope you found this beneficial and useful. Thank you so much, Brother Wadud. Really an honor. And thank you so much for your time, for your insights, for your wisdom, inshallah ta'ala. And I look forward for our second session of the masterclass. And I really wish you, really looking forward to all of everyone's watching on Facebook, YouTube to be part of this journey, inshallah ta'ala. Any final thoughts, advice? How do you close this out in a mindful way? Let's put it this way. Put it that way.
We can close with a verse of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Kitabun anzalnahu ilayka mubarakun liyadabbaru ayatihi wa liyatadhakkaru ulul albab." Kitabun anzalnahu ilayka mubarakun liyadabbaru ayatihi wa liyatadhakkaru ulul albab. This is a Barakah filled. We talked about Barakah today, so Allah says this is a Barakah filled book. That there is no other place to look for Barakah than the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kitabun anzalnahu ilayka mubarak. This is a Mubarak, Barakah filled book, which we reveal to you, O Prophet, so that you may liyatadabbaru, so that you can contemplate. Liyadabbaru, so you can contemplate its verse, and وَلِيَتَذَكَّرُوا, so you can also be mindful. يَتَذَكَّرَ ulul albab, so you can also it is also so you can be mindful, and people of reason may be mindful. Ulul albab, people of reason may be mindful. It's on my screen, on my slide, and some of the harakas are missing, and I don't have this verse memorized, so I was trying to read, but I really see that this ayah was really beautiful to me. And when I was looking at Mubarak, Barakah in the Quran, and I saw that, with that connection, that the Barakah is connected to the concept of tadabbur, contemplation, and also the concept of tadhakkur, or dhikr, or being mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I just wanted to focus on that, inshallah, reflect on that, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people that are the people of reflection and contemplation and more mindful, inshallah, and to get to that sense of mindfulness of God, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, jazakallah khair, barakallahu feekum. And thank you everyone for joining us live and those watching the recording. Hope you find this useful and beneficial. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh.